Listen up, everybody. I absolutely need to tell you about what went down yesterday on First Take because it was genuinely one of the most revealing and strategically explosive discussions about the Golden State Warriors trade situation with Jonathan Kuminga and the jaw-dropping possibility of them pursuing Darius Garland from the Cleveland Cavaliers that I've witnessed all season long, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that Stephen A. Smith, Shannon Sharpe, Mad Dog Russo, and the entire panel spent nearly 4 hours dissecting Shams Charania's bombshell confirmation that the Warriors will discuss trades for Kuminga as early as January 15th when he becomes eligible. The disappointing regression in JK's performance this season, averaging just 12 points on poor efficiency. The various trade suitors from Phoenix Suns to Brooklyn Nets to Indiana Pacers, and most explosively this fascinating scenario where Golden State could pivot from trading Kuminga for a big man like Nick Claxton or Miles Turner to instead pursuing an elite young point guard like Darius Garland, who would partner with Stephen Curry, creating an explosive backcourt duo, while also representing a long-term foundational piece for the post-Curry era. And the way they methodologically evaluated everything from Kuminga's plummeting trade value, despite still having 82% odds of being dealt, to the split opinions around the league about whether his best days are ahead or behind him, to the specific players being discussed like Nick Richards and Mark Williams from Phoenix, to Nick Claxton from Brooklyn, to the strategic motivations for why Garland makes perfect sense as a young dynamic playmaker who complements Curry's off-ball brilliance while alleviating the burden on aging veterans had everyone in the studio absolutely mesmerized, because this isn't just about moving on from a disappointing young prospect. This is about the Warriors potentially making a franchise-altering decision that bridges their current championship window with Stephen Curry, while simultaneously building for the future with a 24-year-old all-star caliber point guard. Hey, what's up, everyone? 1 second before we dive in. That like button right there, hit it now. Takes literally 1 second, but makes a massive difference in growing this channel and reaching more fans. Just smash that, like real quick. Every like pushes this video further, so do me that favor right now. So First Take opens, and Stephen A. Smith has this absolutely urgent intensity, like he's about to reveal insider information that will fundamentally change how we view the Warriors' trade deadline approach. And Stephen A. immediately establishes that Shams Charania, who is the NBA's top insider, has now confirmed what everyone's been speculating about for months regarding Jonathan Kuminga's trade situation. And Stephen A. reads directly from Shams's report, explaining that the Warriors will discuss trades for Jonathan Kuminga as early as January 15th, when he becomes eligible to be dealt, and Kuminga's $22.5 million salary could be used in bigger trade scenario, which essentially means even with his regression and disappointing performance this season, he still holds significant value as a trade chip that can be packaged for impact players. Shannon Sharpe, who's always been incredibly analytical about roster construction, immediately jumps in, addressing the elephant in the room, which is Kuminga's statistical decline this season, and Shannon breaks down the numbers showing JK is averaging just 12 points per game with 6 rebounds and 2.6 assists, which is a significant step back from previous years, where Warriors fans and the organization hoped he'd take that developmental leap into becoming a foundational piece. And Sharpe makes this observation that while the regression makes sense given all the uncertainty about his future and role and rotation minutes, it's also been genuinely disappointing, because even when he's gotten opportunities he hasn't been efficient. He's near the bottom quarter of the NBA in true shooting percentage. He's not knocking down threes consistently. He's not finishing at the rim well, and he's in the top 10% in turnovers per game, which is just a messy combination of statistical indicators. Mad Dog Russo then provides this crucial context about opportunities the Warriors have already passed up that now look incredibly costly in hindsight. And Mad Dog talks about how in recent weeks there were potential trade packages, including a Sacramento Kings first-round pick plus Malik Monk, which now appears to be off the table. And even though Monk might not be a perfect fit, he's a talented scorer who could have been added, and then other moves could have been made around the edges to rebalance the roster. And Russo emphasizes that these missed opportunities combined with Kuminga's declining performance create urgency for Golden State to make a move before his trade value erodes even further. But surprisingly, despite all these negative factors, the trade market for Kuminga hasn't completely dried up, with multiple teams still expressing interest. Stephen A. Smith then reads more details from Shams's reporting and from betting markets, showing that Jonathan Kuminga is literally the most likely player to be traded this season, according to bookmakers and prediction markets, with an 82% probability. And Stephen A. makes this point that while 82% isn't a guaranteed certainty, it's a very strong indication that NBA insiders, front office executives, and informed observers all believe a JK trade is incoming once he becomes eligible in mid-January. And Stephen A. talks about how just a month ago there were discussions about New Orleans being interested with Herb Jones and Trey Murphy-Threed potentially being centerpieces of a deal, or Indiana with Benedict Mathurin and Obi Toppin and Tyrese Walker being in the mix. But in recent weeks, the landscape has shifted, and some of those assets have become less available. But then, Shannon Sharpe introduces what he thinks is the most important philosophical divide in how NBA front offices view Jonathan Kuminga. And Shannon quotes Nick Friedel's reporting, explaining that there are people within the league who believe Kuminga is a really good player who hasn't gotten much opportunity, and his best days are in front of him, while there's a whole other side of the league that says if Kuminga was so good, we would have already seen it by now. And Sharpe emphasizes this fundamental split in evaluation is crucial because it determines which teams will be aggressive in pursuing him and what kind of return packages the Warriors can realistically expect, with teams in the first camp willing to take risks on his upside potential, while teams in the second camp will lowball Golden State with underwhelming offers. Mad Dog Russo then breaks down the specific teams and players that have been most prominently mentioned as potential trade partners, starting with the Phoenix Suns, who according to Dalton Johnson remain one of the top suitors for Jonathan Kuminga. And Mad Dog talks about how Phoenix doesn't necessarily have superstar-level players to send back, but they do have interesting big men like Nick Richards, who's averaging just 4 points in under 10 minutes per game, but shows efficiency and shot-blocking ability that could translate to more minutes with Golden State. And Russo mentions Mark Williams and Kaman Maluak as other Suns' big men who could potentially interest the Warriors, though he admits these aren't the most exciting trade scenarios, but they do provide front-court depth that Golden State desperately needs, especially with how effective Quinton Post has been in limited minutes. But here's where the first take discussion shifts to what Stephen A. Smith calls the more exciting and impactful potential trade target, and Stephen A. reads reporting that the Warriors are expected to show interest in Nick Claxton from the Brooklyn Nets, who are once again open to moving him despite being under contract through the 2027-28 season. And Stephen A. gets really animated, explaining that a straight swap of Jonathan Kuminga for Nick Claxton would be much more encouraging than a Nick Richards-type deal, because Claxton is a legitimate shot-blocking, rim-protecting center, averaging 14 points, 8 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game this season, with the passing development being particularly encouraging. And Stephen A. makes this tactical argument about how Claxton would get completely unlocked playing alongside gravity-pulling facilitators like Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler, who can create easy lob opportunities and open dunks. And Golden State hasn't really had a lob threat of Claxton's caliber playing with Curry throughout his career, so the offensive synergy could be spectacular. Shannon Sharpe then brings up the Miles Turner possibility, citing Jake Fisher's reporting that Turner could potentially be a salary match for Jonathan Kuminga. And Shannon talks about how the Warriors have shown real interest in Turner, dating back to well-chronicled trade discussions between Golden State and Indiana that included various concepts involving Kuminga, Andrew Wiggins, and Buddy Hield. And Sharpe admits that while he thinks Turner is somewhat overrated by the general NBA public as an overall basketball player, he is still someone who would fit perfectly with what the Warriors need because he spaces the floor with three-point shooting, he blocks shots providing rim protection, and he does a lot of the dirty work that championship teams require from their big men. But then the discussion takes this absolutely explosive turn that had everyone watching probably doing double takes. And Stephen A. Smith introduces the possibility of the Golden State Warriors pivoting their entire trade strategy away from pursuing big men like Claxton or Turner, and instead making a blockbuster move for Darius Garland from the Cleveland Cavaliers to add an elite young point guard who would create a dynamic partnership with Stephen Curry, while also representing a foundational piece for the franchise's future. And Stephen A. gets absolutely fired up, explaining that Garland, at just 24 years old, with a long-term contract already signed, would be a pillar for the Warriors' future, potentially assuming control of the team after Curry's eventual retirement, or when other veterans like Draymond Green depart, so you're not just making a win-now move, but actually building something sustainable for the next decade. Mad Dog Russo then provides this fascinating tactical breakdown of why the Garland-Curry backcourt pairing makes so much basketball sense, despite potential defensive concern. And Mad Dog talks about how Garland's game complements Curry beautifully because of his playmaking ability and his career 38.6% three-point shooting, which means defenses can't help off him or sag into the paint. And Russo acknowledges that a dual point guard lineup with two smaller guards could present defensive challenges, but he argues the offensive firepower potential is absolutely explosive, with both players able to shoot pull-up threes off the dribble, run pick-and-roll actions, and create advantages that force defensive rotations, opening up easy baskets. And Mad Dog makes this comparison to other successful small backcourts throughout NBA history, showing that if you have enough shooting and playmaking, the defensive limitations can be managed through scheme and effort. Shannon Sharpe then addresses what he thinks is the most compelling long-term strategic argument for pursuing Garland. And Shannon talks about how the Warriors' core is aging with Curry now in his mid-30s, Draymond Green declining physically, and Klay Thompson already having departed in free agency. And Sharpe explains that acquiring a young dynamic player like Garland, who's already proven he can be an all-star, would alleviate the burden on aging veterans who've been dealing with injury problems and wear and tear from multiple championship runs. And Garland could handle significant ball handling and creation responsibilities, allowing Curry to play more off-ball, where he's still devastatingly effective as a shooter and cutter, without having to initiate every single offensive possession, which saves his legs for playoff basketball. Stephen A. Smith then makes what I thought was the most important point about Golden State's need for an additional shot creator beyond just Curry. And Stephen A. talks about how with Klay Thompson gone and the roster lacking consistent offensive firepower outside of Steph, the Warriors desperately need another player capable of creating his own shot and distributing the ball in high-leverage situations. And Stephen A. argues that Garland checks both boxes as someone who can score at all three levels, while also being a legitimate playmaker who can run the offense in bench units when Curry rests. And that two-way versatility as both scorer and facilitator is exactly what championship contenders need from their secondary star, especially in playoff series, where defenses take away your first option and force others to beat them. Mad Dog Russo then addresses the practical question of what assets the Warriors would need to package to acquire Garland from Cleveland. And Mad Dog speculates that Golden State has interesting trade pieces, starting with Jonathan Kuminga himself, who despite his regression still has upside potential that might appeal to the Cavaliers. Plus, the Warriors have draft picks they could include to sweeten the deal. And Russo makes this argument that if Cleveland has genuinely soured on the Garland-Donovan Mitchell backcourt pairing due to redundancies or suboptimal fit, they might be motivated to move one of them, and Garland, with his age and contract situation, could be the more logical piece to trade, given Mitchell's higher profile and proven playoff success, so there's potentially a deal to be made if both teams are aligned on wanting to shake up their rosters. What really struck me watching this entire First Take segment was how brilliantly the panel wove together immediate tactical analysis of the Kuminga trade market with broader strategic speculation about the Warriors potentially making a franchise-altering move for Darius Garland that would simultaneously address their present championship aspirations with Curry, while also building for the future with a young all-star caliber point guard. And I think the clear consensus was that while trading Kuminga for a big man like Claxton or Turner makes sense and addresses obvious roster needs, the truly transformative move would be pivoting to pursue Garland, whose youth, shooting, playmaking, and complementary skill set alongside Curry could elevate Golden State from a competitive playoff team into legitimate championship favorite, both now and for years to come, as they navigate the transition from the Curry-Clay-Draymond dynasty era into whatever comes next.